Hello, everybody. I'd like to begin with Birchat Kohanim, with the priestly blessings. Vayadaber Adinoi al Moshe Lemar, Daber al Rabbanan Lemar, Kesavarochu es b'nei Yisrael amar lahem, Yavarechecha Adinoi v'yishmerecha, Yoed Adinoi panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adinoi panav elecha, v'yasem lecha shalom, v'samu eshemi, Al b'nei Yisrael v'ani avarachem. Before I conclude this evening, I'm going to ask everyone to join together in the singing of Avinu Malkeinu. So when the sermon is concluded, we're going to unmute everybody. And then in a powerful prayer, united together with people all over the world, we're going to turn to God and we're going to pray together with Avinu Malkeinu, the powerful prayer recited on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I want to thank you for tuning in from wherever you are as we seek to get ourselves into the right mood and mindset for the holy and awesome day of Yom Kippur, now just days away. Indeed, it is my hope that the words you hear will help enable you to transform the difficulties and challenges of our times from a source of frustration and aggravation into a source of motivation and inspiration. As I indicated in my talk before Rosh Hashanah, so much of that depends on our basic premise, outlook, and perspective. And so with that, welcome to our pre-Yom Kippur sermon entitled Privileged and Proud, Celebrating the Bond of Love. Among the many national conversations that have recently been taking place in this country revolves around the idea of privilege, with some people being obviously more privileged than others. It's been cooking up resentments of late, leading many people in different circles to apologize for their privilege. But is privilege in itself a negative thing? Is it a dirty word? Is it a badge of dishonor from which one should hide one's face in shame? So first, let me state very clearly that I think it's important for one to appreciate the privileges one may be fortunate to have. And I think it's important for that awareness to lead one to be more sensitive and more caring and more compassionate towards those who are not as blessed. That said, I do not believe that as a rule one should apologize for one's privilege or feel guilty or ashamed for having it. On the contrary, privilege is exactly that, a privilege. It's good. It's good to be blessed. But at the same time, one should know that being worthy of one's privilege comes with strings attached. Which brings to the question of the day. Are we as Jews privileged? Is it fair and is it accurate to identify Jews as a privileged people? And I think the answer is a resounding yes. We are absolutely privileged. And I don't think we should apologize for it either. In fact, we should be mighty proud of it. But when I say Jews are privileged, I don't mean it in the way some may think. You see, generally speaking, when you hear the word privilege, what comes to mind? Invariably, it's things like receiving special treatment, a leg up, unique access to opportunities, special entree to institutions, to positions of influence. It often means getting special perks and breaks, people cutting you slack, giving you the benefit of the doubt, the assumption of innocence. People of privilege can usually feel extra protected, safe, and secure. By those definitions, where would you say Jews rank in the hierarchy of privilege? Well, let's see. Access and opportunity. You don't have to go back to pre-war Germany or Hungary to find discrimination and quotas being imposed upon Jews. In 1935, the dean at Yale University instructed his admissions committee never admit more than 5 Jews. Harvard's president wrote that too many Jewish students would ruin the college. As recently as the 1970s, Jews and blacks in America were unabashedly denied entry into all sorts of clubs and associations. Many had signs that said, "No dogs, no colored, no Jews." Groucho Marx, of course, found humor in the hate, famously saying that he wouldn't want to join a club that would have him as a member anyway. But then one day he was told that he would be admitted into an exclusive Gentile club only if he didn't swim in the club's pool. So Groucho asked if his daughter, who he called half Jewish, could wade in the pool up to her knees. Okay, now we know there's no such thing as a half Jew, but it's still funny. So special access for Jews, not quite a privilege we've enjoyed that much throughout history. What about benefit of the doubt? What about assumption of innocence? I think we're all too familiar with the vile and preposterous libels and scandals and conspiracies that have been leveled against Jews through the ages. And you don't have to go back hundreds of years either. As we speak today, Amazon continues to sell books that present Jewish blood libels as fact. After an earthquake struck Haiti in 2010, Israel sent one of the largest delegations of aid and established a fully functioning hospital on the island. A member of Britain's House of Lords demanded that an inquiry be set up for Israel to answer accusations that she was the only one making, that Israeli doctors were working in Haiti only so that they could harvest the organs of local residents. According to FBI data, Jews were more than twice as likely to be victims of a hate crime than any other minority group in the country. And how many college campuses are flooded by anti-Israel and anti-Jewish rhetoric and propaganda while drowning out any voices that seek to counter such attacks? Of course, I can go on and on about this subject, but that's not what tonight's talk is about. The only point I'm trying to make here is that by the classic definitions of privilege, access and acceptance and safety and security, Jews are probably among the least privileged people on the planet, certainly in the context of history, but even to an extent in recent times. So if that's the case, what do I mean when I say Jews are privileged and should be proud of it? What privilege am I talking about? So I'll give you my definition, or should I say the Jewish or Torah definition of privilege. True privilege, my friends, is not about how others think of you or even how others treat you. It's about how you think of yourself and how you treat others. True privilege is not about what someone else does or does not do for you. It's about what you do with what you have. Our sages tell us that God wanted to give the Jewish people merit, so he gave us the Torah and the mitzvot in abundance. God wanted us to be privileged, so he entrusted us with the responsibility of living virtuous and righteous lives so that we may elevate and transform his world according to his vision. So no, Jewish privilege doesn't usually mean special access or opportunity or favors, but it does mean that we are called upon to set an example of living a meaningful life, of repairing the world in God's image and being of service to others. It means rising above how others may treat us, to treat all human beings with dignity, with compassion, and with honor. Some 50 years ago, a Torah scholar by the name of Rabbi Yitzchak Hunter, who was had a very close relationship with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was a featured speaker at a national convention of Jewish educators. In his remarks, the rabbi told this esteemed gathering of principals and teachers from Jewish schools across the country that he could summarize their entire task in 5 Hebrew words. the 5 words from the blessing recited in front of the Torah when we're called up for an aliyah. Asher bochar banu mikol ha'amim, who has chosen us from among all the nations. We are called upon to be exceptional. If nothing else, he said, your job of inspiring the Jewish future comes down to your ability to communicate this concept to the next generation. If a child walks away with nothing else from their Jewish education, but are made to feel that they are exceptional, privileged, to be charged with being different, then you've fulfilled your mission. Not that the rest is unimportant, but this is central. Now, to be clear, privilege doesn't mean superior. It means having greater responsibilities. It is not intended for us to hoist ourselves onto pedestals, but to feel humbly obligated to live more ethically, to act more charitably, to proclaim our faith more proudly, without any shame, without any embarrassment whatsoever. And I'll say this, notwithstanding the challenges of prejudice and discrimination I referred to earlier, the fact is that in most Jewish communities in the 21st century, we are blessed with material and social privileges, the likes of which our ancestors could not have dreamed of enjoying. And we don't have to apologize for it, and we don't have to feel guilty or insecure about that either. We should, however, be thankful and always remember that a Jew doesn't focus on his own entitlements. Rather, he constantly thinks of how his resources can be better used to promote good in the world, especially for the benefit of the underprivileged. Last year, Israel's women's lacrosse team competed in the World Championship in Peterborough, Canada. In their playoff game against Kenya's national team, Israel won handedly 13-4. But instead of rejoicing in their victory, the Israeli players left the game upset and disturbed. They realized that they had enjoyed an unfair advantage. You see, while the Israeli players wore state-of-the-art sports shoes with cleats, their Kenyan opponents wore plain old gym shoes. Now, without proper cleats, the Kenyan players kept sliding and falling in the muddy parts of the field. So after the game, some of the young Israeli players called their parents to express how badly they felt watching their counterparts on the field struggle like that. One of the players' fathers, Michael Dodovini, who runs a pet ortho clinic, expressed concern about the long-lasting damage the Kenyan players might be doing to their feet by playing such intense games in improper shoes. So that night, Dodovini called the team's coaches. He called the committee members and some of the other parents. And they organized a collection to buy new shoes for the Kenyan team. They called the Kenyan coach and they asked for a list of each player's shoe size and asked them to keep the gesture secret for the time being. It wasn't easy to find custom shoes on such short notice, but miraculously they were able to find a specialty store willing to stay open late, to source the shoes and fill the order quickly. By the following morning, the Israelis had bought shoes for each member of the Kenyan team. That day, the Israeli team surprised the Kenyans on the field, each team member giving a bag containing a brand new pair of shoes to their counterpart. It was an emotional moment with the Israeli and Kenyan players hugging each other and crying together. The Israelis didn't seek any publicity, but Kenya Lacrosse posted a video on Twitter of the Israeli women delivering the new shoes to the Kenyan team. Yesterday, we played Israel lacrosse and had no cleats, they posted. Today, Israel surprised the whole team on the sideline with brand new cleats. Although the Kenya team had only a few hundred followers, the moving video went viral. And within days, hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of people had watched it. Wearing their new cleats, Kenya went on to win their next game, beating Belgium 16-9. They tweeted, "One game in cleats today equals one win." And then they added, "No one can help everyone, but everyone can help someone." In the words of Israeli goalie Lili Asayag, "This is what I will remember in 20 years from now. Not the adventures of world competition, but the inspiring expressions of love and of kindness." The great sage Hillel said, "In a place where there are no leaders, strive to be a leader." Each of us can make a difference wherever we are. Sometimes even in the smallest gestures, it can have such a huge impact on the lives of others in ways we can't begin to imagine. That's what we mean by privilege. Paul Cohn is a sports agent who lives in the Valley and represents many professional baseball players. He's also an observant Jew. And he told the story of how a few years ago, one of his clients, a star pitcher by the name of Tim Hudson, was becoming a free agent. A top-tier pitcher with more than 200 wins as a major leaguer, Tim Hudson was in high demand. As the signing date was approaching, there were 15 offers on the table, which they narrowed down to 4. It was a Friday night, late November. A Friday afternoon in late November, negotiations were coming down to the wire. Candle lighting time that Friday was 4:30 p.m. Now, 2 of the general managers involved in the talks knew about Paul being an observant Jew, but the other 2 who were newer did not. So on a 3:30 conference call from his home, Paul gives them all heads up. "Gentlemen, at 4 p.m. today, we need to wrap up negotiations because at 4:30, the Sabbath comes in." With that, they proceeded to refine the offers from the 4 teams. At 3:58, Paul calls Bob Evans, who was then the GM of the San Francisco Giants. And he says, "Bobby, we're good to go. It's you, you're the pick, it's the Giants. I'm going to let the other 3 teams know that they're out. I'm not going to tell them who we're signing with since the deal is not yet signed, but just so that they can do what they need to do without my Sabbath interfering with their plans. You and I will wrap this up Saturday night. We'll get it all signed and wrapped up." Now, Bob Evans, who was not Jewish but very respectful, tried to see if there was something here. He doesn't want to leave it hanging for the next day. So he says, "Paul, what about if I email you? Can you do that on the Sabbath? What if I send a messenger? Can we somehow wrap this up tonight?" To which Paul smiled and said, "Bobby, it doesn't work that way, but trust me, it's all good. It's as good as done. I'll talk to you tomorrow night. Bye." And he hangs up the phone. And sure enough, after the Shabbos is over, they convened, they completed the deal. Tim Hudson became a San Francisco Giant. Fast forward 2 years. Tim Hudson is retiring. It's his last game. The Giants are playing the Dodgers in San Francisco. Paul Cohn is there with Hudson's family to watch Tim's final appearance on the mound. They were invited to watch the game from the owner's suite. The owner of the Giants, Larry Baer, walks over to Paul and says, "Can we talk?" He says, "Sure." So Larry says, "Do you remember when we did the Hudson deal 2 years ago?" Paul says, "I do." So Larry said to him, "When Bobby Evans called me and told me this whole thing about the cutoff time for the Shabbat, I immediately called my wife and I said, 'Pamela, we haven't had a Shabbat dinner with the kids in as long as I can remember. Please call all the kids, tell them to come over, have them drop their cell phones at the door because we're going to have a proper Shabbat because we're Jews.' And you know what, Paul? Because of you, because of your inspiration, we had Shabbat dinner that Friday night. It was so beautiful, and we've had many more since. So thank you." Paul Cohn was very touched and thought that was nice. That was nice. In the 6th inning, Larry Baer approaches him again. "Paul, my wife wants to talk to you for a minute. Is that okay?" "Sure." Pamela walks over, and after exchanging pleasantries, she says, "Paul, you remember the Hudson contract 2 years ago? And he smiles and says, yes, yeah, I heard from your husband. She says, no, I want to personally thank you. You see, a few years before that, my father had passed away, and no one ever said Kaddish for him. And on his yard site, nobody ever lit a candle. But in hearing about your exchange with Bob Evans, and after it prompted our family to have a Shabbat dinner, I decided to do something about it. And now we never miss a yard site. A candle is lit and Kaddish is said. And my father's memory is properly honored in accordance with our tradition. Because we're Jews. And thank you for reminding of us who we are. You see, wherever a Jew goes and whatever he does, when he allows his values and his ideals to shine forth, it has a way of touching people's lives and lighting up the environment around him. So these days, when people say, check your privilege, which I think is used to put people in their place and deny them the right to speak on certain issues, I say, as Jews, we should indeed constantly check our privilege, but not in the politically correct sense. Check your privilege as in don't leave it behind. Take it with you and always allow it to shine forth. The Talmud relates a powerful story about Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha. Rabbi Yishmael was the Kohen Gadol. He was the high priest in the Holy Temple. And on Yom Kippur, Rabbi Yishmael would go into the temple's innermost chamber, the Holy of Holies, to perform the service of the day. It is in the Holy of Holies that the Holy Ark was there. While there, he had a vision. And in this vision, he saw the angel Kasriel sitting before God. And God in this vision is asking Rabbi Yishmael, speaking to Rabbi Yishmael, and he says, Rabbi Yishmael, give me a blessing. So Rabbi Yishmael blessed God. He blessed God that whatever anger or displeasure he may be feeling towards his children, it should be washed away and overtaken by his overwhelming love for them. You see, instead of voicing demands and expectations, what is it that God asks for on the holiest of days, in the holiest of places? He asked for a blessing. He asked for a blessing from us. So Rabbi Yishmael complied, and he blessed God to deal mercifully and compassionately with his children. Because in the end, what does God want more than anything else? He wants to be close to us. Now, that being the case, there was something that had me rather confused over the past several months, and perhaps many of you as well. Going back a few months already, we've been trying to figure out how to hold high holiday services in the midst of a pandemic shutdown. The government agencies laid out all sorts of restrictions with regard to how communal prayer may be conducted. The rabbis, the halachic authorities were unequivocal in their insistence that all health guidelines be followed to a T. After all, Torah law mandates health first. So our services had to be moved and curtailed and adjusted and abbreviated and so on. So I was wondering to myself, God, you want us to be close to you, and yet you've allowed a situation to develop whereby for months now, our shuls, our synagogues, our schools, our houses of worship, our study halls, where we tend to feel closest to you, have essentially been shut down. Ribbona Shalom, Master of the universe, what is it that you want from us? Why is it that sometimes the closer we try to get to you, the further away you seem to be moving from us? No social gathering, no congregating, no indoor communal worship. Fine, so we should just shut it down completely. We can all sit back and feel totally justified in our complacency. And nobody can fault us, much less God himself, for not going out of our way to try to pray, to try to celebrate, to connect to this particular holiday season. It's just not feasible or practical this year, right? And yet, that's not what happened. Quite the contrary. For all the obstacles placed before us, how have most Jews been dealing with these challenges? Remarkably, we have seen individuals and communities respond with renewed resolve, a redoubled sense of devotion and determination. In our own community, after extensive discussions with the state, and then with the county, and with city officials, and with hotel managers, and with park commissioners, and school board members, and rabbinic authorities, we worked on a Plan A. That was in May, which then had to be scrapped in favor of Plan B. That was in June. From there, we went to Plan C. That was in July, until we finally settled on Plans D, and E, and F, and G, which is a combination of pre-holiday sermons on Zoom like we're doing now, do-it-yourself home prayer guides, shofar ceremonies in the parks, outdoor services in shifts, with masks, with social distancing. Thousands of my Chabad colleagues all over the world became experts on tents and canopies, each one becoming their own Noah, building an ark for their community. Hundreds of thousands gathered a few days ago on the second day of Rosh Hashanah in parks across the world to hear shofar blowing. Did you hear me? Hundreds of thousands in thousands of parks across the world. Why? Why are we doing all this? The answer is because for us, connecting with God is not something we do merely out of a sense of obligation or a nostalgic nod towards tradition. We see it as privilege, which we're not about to surrender so quickly and so easily. Whatever the challenges, we will not be denied. We will not be denied the fullest expression of our deep bond with the Holy One, blessed be He. This is who we are. It's who we have been since God chose us from among the nations, and it's who we shall be until the end of time. There's a very powerful statement in our prayers. After referencing some of the trials and tribulations we have endured through the millennia, we declare, Uvechol zois, shimcha lo shachachnu. Despite all this, we have not forgotten your name, O God. No al tishkachenu, so we implore you, God, do not forget us. The Babylonians sent us into exile. The Romans burned our temple and destroyed Jerusalem. We faced the Spanish Inquisition and Khmelnytsky and Hitler, Yamach Shemoy, and Stalin. Uvechol zoi shimcha lo shachachnu. Despite all this, we have not forgotten your name, O God. No al tishkachenu, we implore you, God, do not forget us. This is who we are. Now, obviously, our struggles are not as great as those generations, but that same verse comes to mind, that despite it all, we have not forgotten, we have not walked away. Instead, we resolve that one way or another we will connect during these high holy days, not less than in other years, but more. Different to be sure, but not inferior. Now, whether we'll be praying in solitude at home or with fellow masked Jews under an outdoor canopy, this Yom Kippur, like Rosh Hashanah before it, will reach above and beyond any other we've ever experienced. Above and beyond, because it will be coming from the deepest chambers of love within our souls. In fact, it is the same resolve and faith I've seen exhibited by many in this community ever since the pandemic hit us hard back in March. While some understandably reacted to the adverse financial effects of the coronavirus by freezing or reducing their charitable giving during this time, There have been others that dafka necessarily gone out of their way to do the opposite, recognizing that there are many poor souls in our midst who have been having it much worse than them themselves, to the point of literally not having access to money for food. And these very kind supporters have seized upon this time of crisis to be more forthcoming and more generous than usual. That is what it means to truly and proudly celebrate one's privilege. Seeing all of this unfold, all I can say is that God must be looking down and deriving some tremendous nachas from his children, who rather than use these challenges as excuses to back away, are turning them into catalysts through which to forge a stronger and deeper relationship with him. And just as he did back then with Rabbi Yishmael, God is asking each of us to bless him, to sanctify his name this Yom Kippur. And that is exactly what we're doing. So confusion, not anymore. Despair, not at all. Disillusionment, none. I'll tell you what there is. There is inspiration, there is perseverance, there is connection. Because despite all of this, we have not forgotten your name. No al tishkachenu. Please, God, do not forget us. Joseph Friedenson was a Holocaust survivor, a lecturer, a writer, and editor of a Yiddish paper called The Vart. One of the stories he would often tell occurred when he and his fellow inmate in the camps, a young man named Avi Ezri, were on garbage detail, which was located near the women's barracks. And one day they're doing their work when a thin teenage girl started crying from behind the fence of the women's camp. Drawing closer to find out what she wanted, she pleaded with them for a sweater, a sveter in Yiddish. Joseph's friend Avi Ezri, his heart broke for this poor girl. She must have been suffering terribly from the cold, so he decided he was going to try to help her. At great personal risk, Avi Ezri was somehow able to find the sweater, and he hid it by placing it under his prisoner uniform, and he approached the fence of the women's camp. A few minutes later, he returned to Joseph in a deep emotional state, with tears streaming down his cheeks. Shaking his head in bewilderment, he said, "She wasn't asking for a sweater, a siddur. She was asking for a siddur, for a prayer book. It was close to Rosh Hashanah, and she wanted something to enable her to pray. A siddur is what this poor girl was crying for, what she was yearning for in the cold darkness of one of the most horrific places on earth." That story stayed with Joseph Friedenson his entire life because it encapsulated the Jewish spirit and the Jewish worldview of never giving in when facing adversity. This is Am Yisrael. This is whom God chose from among the nations. As King Solomon writes in Song of Songs, many mighty waters cannot extinguish the fire of this love. Through the fire and through the hell, through the invasions and through the dispersions, through the pogroms and through the persecutions, and yes, even through plagues and pandemics, the bond of love that ties God to the Jewish people remains one of the most invincible, unbreakable, and unshakable forces on earth. A number of years ago, a young man named Anatoly, who grew up in Odessa in the former Soviet Union before being able to immigrate to the United States, decided to go back for a visit to the city of his childhood. Walking along the streets of his own town, he ran into an old man who remembered him from his youth. And the man invited him into his home. And at one point in the conversation, the elderly gentleman reached up to a bookshelf, pulled down a musty volume, and said, "I found this many years ago. Now that you left Odessa, I want you to take this part of Odessa with you." Anatoly looks down, And he sees that the man handed him a machzor, a Yom Kippur prayer book. As he leafed through the pages, it appeared to be a regular old machzor, so old, in fact, that the pages were brown and brittle. But then something caught his eye. Looking more closely, he was shocked at what he saw. On the pages of the prayer Avinu Malkeinu, which means our Father, our King, he noticed that every word Malkeinu, every word our King, was crossed out. And it was replaced with the word Tsar. Then the word Tsar was crossed out, and it was replaced with the word Stalin. And then Stalin was crossed out and replaced with the name of the next dictator. It was absolutely astonishing. Clearly, that machzor had been well used by someone who went to shul and prayed. However, this person must have had reason to fear that everything was being scrutinized by the czarists, by the communist regime. So he changed the text for safety based on their demands and threats. Anatoly took the precious machzor back with him to the United States, to Los Angeles, where he now lives. And the following Yom Kippur, he took the storied machzor with him to services at his local shul. And carefully and gently turning the fragile pages during the prayers, whenever he saw the various crossouts in the Avinu Malkeinu prayer, he would well up with emotion, as he could feel the hot tears of the previous owner of that machzor jumping at him from the words. How fortunate I am, he said to himself, to live in a time and place where I can sing and pray and cry out at the top of my lungs, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. We have no king but you. After services, Anatoly went over to the rabbi of his synagogue, Rabbi Aaron Friedman, and he showed him the machzor. The rabbi was deeply moved. He then shared something very profound. He said, yes, the word Malkeinu, the word our king, had been crossed out and substituted with the names of tyrants and intimidating forces who feigned and postured themselves as kings in the place of God. But no matter what, no one could deign to replace the word Avinu, Avinu, our Father. The title of Tata in Himmel, our dear Father, belongs to God alone. And no one can ever change that. Indeed, the relationship between God and the Jewish people is a two-dimensional one. There is the bond of covenant, and there's the bond of love. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. The covenant is about God's expectations of us as King. The love is the paternal bond that never frays, that keeps the door open no matter what. So that even if at times we don't live up to our end of the deal, God will never break his covenant with us, because his parental love for us is eternal and it's unconditional. There was a survivor who passed away last year at the age of 94. And during the Shiva, his children and grandchildren shared an amazing story about him, or more accurately, a story about his mother. It sent chills down the spines and brought tears to the eyes of everyone who heard it. He and his mother were on the train, the cattle car, to Auschwitz together. They arrived at the platform and were forced onto the selection line to face the infamous Dr. Mengele. Seeing the woman who looked much older than her years, Mengele immediately sent her to the left, to a certain fate in the gas chambers and crematoriums. Her son, who looked older and stronger than his years, was sent to the right, which would destine him for work detail. The boy, however, could not bear to be parted from his mother. So he ran to the other side to join her in line. And she told him to go back to the other line while he still had the chance. The boy started to cry, refusing to budge. And then in perhaps the bravest act of her life, the woman slapped her son across his face and shoved him and scolded him to go back to the other line. And so his final and lasting memory of his mother, the lingering image of his dear mama that would stay with him for the rest of his long life, was that of a hard smack and a harsh rebuke. And yet, it was the most beautiful and loving image of all. Because of all the many kind and selfless things his mother had ever done for him, that was surely the most loving and selfless of all. To set aside personal hesitations and difficulties, to do what is ultimately best for one's child, is the height of parental love. So sometimes we wonder, if God loves us so much, why are we often smacked so harshly? That's a question we often ask ourselves, and we often wonder to ourselves. And it's a hard question. It's a difficult question, but it's a question that we have to ask. The Lubavitcher Rebbe once spoke about this question at a Farbrengen, and he started sobbing. And the Rebbe said, if God can do it all, why not just provide the goodness and the sweetness without the pain? And if the Torah has all the answers, why doesn't it give us the answer to this question? And then the Rebbe started crying openly. There can be only one explanation. God doesn't want us to know. Because if we knew, the reasons would be okay with the status quo. We'd go about our lives being just fine with the world staying exactly the way it is. And God doesn't want us to accept things as they are. God wants us to hope and to pray and to yearn for better. He wants us to go out there and make it better. He wants us to question and to challenge and to grapple and to fight, and ultimately to emerge stronger and better and more resilient and faithful for it. And know this, just as nothing can bring a parent greater joy than when a long-lost child returns home into his father or mother's embrace, so nothing brings God greater nachas than when a precious soul that has drifted from him or her roots returns to the covenant and the love that binds us to our Father in heaven. And so, my friends, as we continue to contend with this corona pandemic, with cases continuing to crop up in different pockets of the world, including Israel, let us bear in mind that God is not in quarantine. God is not wearing a hazmat suit. He isn't distancing himself from any of us socially or otherwise. In fact, he can be found all around us through his special angels, the doctors, the nurses, the volunteers, the donors who have been performing extraordinary acts of kindness throughout. He can be found in the passion of those who've been praying intensely for those in the throes of illness. He can be found in the blessings of life we receive through each breath we are blessed to take. During the early terrible days of the outbreak, when people were dying by the thousands, including many in the Jewish communities, a nurse from a busy hospital in New Jersey contacted a local rabbi by the name of Moshe Bryski. She said, "Rabbi, there are people here who are dying alone. There's no family. There's no rabbi. Can you possibly make a recording? And we'll put it by the patient's ears so that before they die, they can have that last prayer." Rabbi Bryski, who perhaps thought his own voice might not be soothing enough for the situation, called his colleague, Rabbi Yechiel Sparrow, and he asked if he would be willing to make that fateful recording. So with a heavy heart, Rabbi Sparrow sat down with his device, pressed record, and proceeded to recite the prayers that are traditionally said when a soul is about to depart this world. He said the words slowly and clearly. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And then he said the Oshamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, the confessional prayers, and other short prayers for a peaceful send-off. And he sent the recording over to his friend. But then after thinking about it, he called Rabbi Ratberg and said, they're going to the world of truth. I didn't leave any words of strength and inspiration. So Rabbi Ratberg said, 30 seconds. Keep it to 30 seconds because the nurse is not going to stand there for long. So Rabbi Sparrow now had 30 seconds to speak to the people who are literally on their last breaths. Religious Jews, secular Jews, affiliated, unaffiliated, Hasidic, modern, middle of the road, one message for all. Fighting back tears, this is what he said. My dear fellow Jew, know that you are never alone. I'm sorry if you feel alone right now, but a Jew is never alone. And that's because we are not just physical beings, we are spiritual beings as well. God is with you. Your family is with you. Your fellow Jews, your spiritual brothers and sisters are with you. Schlaf gesund. Sleep well. God willing, we'll see you on the great day. That was his message. In the powerful words penned by King David in Psalm 23, even as I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because I know you are with me. In this parting speech to us all, Moses said, in effect, dear children, when God tried to speak directly to your parents at Mount Sinai, they trembled with fear and were overwhelmed. They said, if we hear any more of this, we will surely die. So God provided ways for you to meet him without being overwhelmed. Yes, he is the creator, the supreme power, the first cause, the mover of the planets and the stars and so on. But remember that he is also your parent, your partner, your beloved, your friend. He is the Shekhinah, which comes from the word Shachen, which means the neighbor next door. He's right there next to you. So thank him every morning for the gift of life. Say the Shema twice daily for the gift of love. Join your voice to others in prayer so that his spirit may flow through you, giving you the strength and the courage to change the world. God's Torah is not in the heavens, nor is it beyond the sea. The beauty of Jewish spirituality is that you don't have to climb tall mountains or even enter large sanctuaries to experience it. It can even happen in a makeshift canvas tent when everything else has been shut down. It can be captured in the personal prayers you offer in solitude. It can be found around the Shabbat table, in the glow of the candles, in the simple holiness of the Kiddush wine, in the aroma of the challah, in the song of Shalom Aleichem, and in the peace of mind that permeates the entire home when you allow the world to look after itself for a day while you celebrate the good things that come not from working, but from resting, not from buying, but from enjoying the gifts you have had all along but did not have time to appreciate. In Judaism, God is close. He is there in the poetry of the Psalms, the greatest literature of the soul ever written. He is there listening in our discussions as we study the pages of the Torah and the Talmud. He is there in the rings we wrap around our fingers with the straps of our tefillin. He is there in a child's reach to the top of a doorpost to kiss the mezuzah. He is there in the joy of the festivals and in the holiness of the days of awe. He is there in the very air of the land of Israel and in the stones of Jerusalem. If you cannot see him, it is only because you're looking in the wrong direction. When he seems absent, he's actually there, just right behind you. but you have to turn to meet him. He is the first voice you can hear in the silence of your soul when you pray at home. He is the light you see when you open your eyes to wonder. He is the hand you touch when you are in the pit of despair. His is the breath that keeps you alive. My friends, we are indeed privileged, but we understand that privilege is not a luxury, it's a legacy. Like our grandparents before us, we should be proud of our Jewish privilege as we hope and pray that our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren will be proud of theirs. With the approach of Yom Kippur, during which we will be reciting Yizkar, remember the souls of our dearly departed loved ones. Let us appreciate that we are what we are because of those who came before us. Our lives are not disconnected fragments. We are each a letter in God's book of life. And although single letters are each themselves vehicles of meaning, they have little meaning when they stand alone. To have true meaning, they must be joined to other letters to make words and to make sentences and to make paragraphs and to make a story. We are all part of the oldest, most incredible story ever written. The story of a tiny people, never large and often homeless, who outlived the greatest empires the world has known, from the Egyptians to the Babylonians, the Greeks and the Romans, all the way to the Third Reich and the Soviet Union. Each thought itself immortal. Each has gone. But Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people, still live. We defeat death not by living forever, but by living by values that live forever, by doing deeds and creating blessings that will live on after us, and by attaching ourselves in the midst of time to God who lives beyond time. I'd like to conclude with one final story. The year was 1939. The Stechiner Rebbe and his followers were trying to escape the Germans' advance across Poland and ended up in the city of Kolbasov. Although it brought them little time, they soon learned that the Germans were closing in on that town as well. The Rebbe and his Hasidim were trapped. It was on a Saturday that the Nazis entered Kolbasov. The Rebbe and his followers were in the middle of the Shabbat meal when they heard the trucks rumbling and the dogs barking in the distance. Some of the women and children began to whimper, but the Rebbe, retaining his serenity and composure throughout, reassured them that all would be okay. The men discussed amongst themselves that while in the presence of the Nazis, they had to be careful not to accord the Rebbe any special reverence or respect, lest the monsters deduce that this was a person of importance and single him out for extra mockery or punishment, which was their routine whenever they learned the identity of the rabbi or leader of a given community. At the same time, they were concerned because the Rebbe was elderly and would likely need assistance. Soon the sounds were close by. "Rausch, Rausch," shouted the Nazi soldiers, demanding the people come out. The poor frightened families emerged from their small houses and, as ordered, headed towards the center of town. Once in the center square, they were told to stay quiet, to lift their hands up in the air and to keep them up, and if they didn't want to get shot on the spot. All was silent in the square. No one dared make a sound. The Hasidim and family members of the Rebbe were careful not to stare at the Rebbe, but they would steal an occasional glance in his direction just to make sure he was all right. At one point they noticed the Rebbe was struggling to keep his hands over his head. They feared for his life, but didn't move to help him so as not to risk revealing his identity. They had to stand helplessly nearby and watch the beloved Rebbe suffer, hoping his hands would stay up and not give the Nazis reason to shoot. Suddenly, from across the plaza, a young girl stepped forward, and she walked with purpose towards the Rebbe. The crowd watched in hushed silence. Even the Nazi soldiers were silent and mystified at the bravery or the stupidity of this girl. Did she want to get herself killed? And she finally reached the Rebbe. The elderly holy man looked down and saw that the girl was none other than his own granddaughter. She looked up at her Zaidi and then reached up to hold his hands in place. "It's okay, Zaidi," she said. "You can rest your hands now. I'm holding them up for you." As if he were finally able to lower a load of bricks, the Rebbe released his hands, and they settled into the eager arms of his brave granddaughter. The officer in charge decided to let the girl hold her grandfather's hand up, snidely daring her to tire and give up so you would have an excuse to murder the old Jew in cold blood. But the girl did not tire. She did not flinch. As if propelled by an otherworldly force, she continued to hold her dear Zaidi's hands aloft towards the heavens. The silent crowd stood staring in awe and in silent prayer. When any of them felt on the verge of losing heart, they would look up at the hands of the Rebbe being held high by his granddaughter, and they would gain new strength and new resolve. This torturous, pointless charade went on for hours until the sun began to set. Everyone watched and waited. The little girl continued to hold up her Zaidi's hands. Light turned into darkness. The nighttime air grew colder. Miraculously, the hands remained held high. This was still in the days before the deportations to concentration camps and mass confinements into ghettos. Most Nazi actions against Jews at that point were mainly designed to intimidate and control, though they wouldn't hesitate to shoot or issue beatings in the process if that's what would help get their sick points across. Well, the effort in the square of Kolbasov that day didn't seem to be working out for them. And finally, at one point, the group of soldiers and their disgraced officer had had enough of whatever it was they were trying to do. And inexplicably, they just walked away, allowing the fortunate group of Jews to return to their homes. With dignity and with pride, the Rebbe walked back home, surrounded by his Hasidim and an incredible girl who restored their courage and their faith. Many who witnessed what took place that day lived to tell the story. They would say that the incident reminded them of the biblical account of Moses sitting atop a rock with his hands raised towards the heavens as the Israelites waged war against the evil Amalekites. As long as Moses' hands were raised, Israel was victorious in battle. But when his arms would tire and fall, the tide would turn the other way. So Moses' brother and his nephew went and stood alongside him, keeping his hands raised towards the heavens until Amalek was defeated and Israel lived. The survivors of Kolbasov would always believe that they had witnessed a miracle that day. Moreover, an awesome sign from above saying that future generations stood ready to hold up the torch of Yiddishkeit, that is the legacy of their grandparents. And so we live on. Indeed, that brave girl who held the hands of the Stetchener Rebbe high that day would go on to become the matriarch of a Hasidic dynasty that continues to thrive to this day. May the Almighty grant us all the courage and the foresight to continue carrying the torch of faith high, to continue wearing our privilege proudly, seeing to pass this legacy on to our children and to our grandchildren, the guarantors of our future. And may he grant us the strength and the perseverance to rise above the difficulty we and the entire world are now facing, so that we may celebrate this bond of love that lends meaning and purpose to our lives, in good health, with peace of mind, with nachas, with prosperity and blessings for our families, for Israel, and for all of mankind. Before we sign off, I hope you will permit me to make one more very important point. There is an old Hasidic saying, love those whom God loves, and God will love you. Do a favor to those whom God loves, and God will favor you. Who are those whom God loves? They are his children. We've all experienced it. If somebody treats our kids well, there's nothing we wouldn't do to show them our gratitude in return. So too, God looks kindly upon those who go out of their way to take care of those of his children in need. As many of you know, every year on Yom Kippur Eve at the Conejo service, an appeal is made for support for our outreach and social service programs. And we put out these pre-printed, personalized pledge cards on everyone's seat for them to fold in an amount. The cards are then passed up to the front and placed in the Holy Ark and the Aron Kodesh for the duration of Yom Kippur, thereby evoking special blessings from on high for the donors and their loved ones. As I mentioned earlier this year, the need is greater than ever, as there are many in our community who are out of work and hurting terribly. We continue to help them discreetly, generously, and consistently, enabling them to get through this difficult time of crisis as it continues to cause great hardship for so many. So with many not being able to make it to services this year, we're holding our Kol Nidre appeal online, giving people a chance to do their mitzvah before the onset of Yom Kippur. So please, this evening or tomorrow or Sunday, go to chabadconejo.com/appeal to participate in this Kol Nidre appeal. Your electronic pledge will be printed out before Sunday night and placed in the ark, remaining there during all services conducted throughout Yom Kippur. In the merit of your attending to the needs of those whom God loves, may the gates of heaven indeed be thrown wide open to your prayers, with God in turn inscribing and sealing you and yours for a Shana Tova U'Mesuka, for a good and sweet year. I'd like to ask everyone now to join together